Mrs. Rima Freiji, who is the president of the Lebanese Private Sector Network, a very active network, and chairwoman of the Tanwiyah Group as well, who will be talking about the private sector and the compliance issues of the private sector. I think in a nutshell, I feel like we have maybe 3 types of firms in Lebanon. We've got the informal firms, we've got the former companies, but with informal labor, and you've got the former companies with formal labor. And how do we actually deal with that? What's the impact of that on the ones who are former and formal? What's the cost on the growth? And this is very important for us, because if we really want to broaden the tax base, I think we need to start thinking about these issues with you. So looking forward to your intervention. One of the issues that really got my attention in this budget, if I look at ضريبة الدخل, salary tax, it's increased from 2025 to 2026 by 138%. ضريبة الدخل, tax salary, versus ضريبة الأرباح, tax on profit, increased by 12%. So people who are actually paying salaries, those people, they're as a bulk, they're increased, and then the tax on movable assets decreased, by the way, by 30%. Now, if an economy is growing, because, and why am I saying that? Those 3 taxes should be highly correlated. They should be all going together. In fact, if you look at previous numbers in the budget, you'll see them. There's a 90% correlation here. Now, but when you see them diverging, you wonder what's going on. Now, unless they're really expecting a high growth, not only high growth that's going to trickle down to salaries, to higher salaries, which then, and as if the private sector would not be making a lot of profit. So it's like a socialist. Suddenly we become a socialist economy. If you think about it, they're giving people above, the laborers above the capital, which obviously doesn't really make sense, right? But why am I saying all of this? Is just to pave the way for the issue of compliance. What's the issue here? What's the cost of that, and how do we rectify it? Over to you.
Okay. First of all, you triggered me with that question, and I'm not sure, I'll leave it to the experts to answer, but I'm not sure it has anything to do with the devaluation and the sudden shifts and increase in declaring certain salaries. Probably that's what it has to do with, because it does show an imbalance. Anyway, thank you for having me here. I walked in thinking I have 2 things in mind: the shift in mindset and the approach to this issue from a comprehensive manner. And it was fantastic to attend the first session where His Excellency Fadi Makki taught us about the nudge theory and the whole behavioral economics. And I was like, okay, so now we're talking about this mindset shift. And Mrs. Ibrahim also was talking about that. And that's nice to see in the discussions taking place. And the other thing Maitre Karim Dahir was talking about, we cannot take any measure single-handedly without looking at its economic impact. So from a basic private sector lens, we look at the situation in the country like we look at a bankrupt company. Okay, so when you come to a bankrupt company and you say, now I want to restore this company and be able to sell again and be able to pay my dues, etc., what do? Do you sit in your little audit room and in the finance room and sit and nitpick on all the tiny things you need to do in order to recover your losses only? Or at the same time, you also start working on improving your sales and growing? And what we have felt as a private sector community is the approach of the state towards the crisis has been much more focused on covering for the losses rather than encouraging growth. And with our GDP having dropped so much, and with unemployment having reached probably 40% from what I understand, it should be our be-all and end-all as citizens and as the state to focus on growth. Because without that, we're not going to be able to do anything. I'd rather focus on growth first, on the coverage of tax collection first, before we start nitpicking on the existing formal economy that is actually paying on behalf of everybody else. And actually the only one that is actually providing the government with any revenues. So that's the other type of mindset shift that needs to take place. So the Lebanese private sector network actually was created under one purpose, which is to protect this formal economy, because we started seeing that the private sector that is paying taxes, that is being lawful, that is also protecting its own employees in the absence of state services, that needs to be not only protected, but even in our purpose statement, it is dual. One, we protect those that still exist, but at the same time, we work on promoting growth and sustainability of this formal private sector. So if there's a mission statement that needs to be written on every government individual, is to say, my duty first and foremost is to make sure my most important asset class, which is this formal private sector, remains and grows, rather than make their life hell. So this is one thing. And of course, in return for making the life of the formal private sector hell, a lot of incentives then, indirect incentives, have come to the formal private sector to become informal. And so now I think we have, since 2019, 38,000 less registered businesses, apart from the new businesses that have found opportunity in crisis, which happens all over the world. And of course, they're going to come and say, why be even registered? Let's stay informal. And so now we have an incentive to be informal and a disincentive to be formal. Anyway, so in a nutshell, those who remain formal are actually carrying the entire compliance and tax burden of the informal actors. So, and this is where we need to really be careful. But you know a lot of that. And how are we going to try to change? First, we need to recognize what is the cost of the compliance. As private sector businesses, we are facing labor competition, product competition by companies that are not registered, service competition, and therefore our cost has become higher and we are unable to compete, and this will create more job losses and does not benefit the ultimate goal of growth and employment. There's also, of course, revenue leakage for the government, unpaid VAT, undeclared payroll, weakened institutions, and therefore weakened public services. There's a lot of brain drain because skilled professionals move to the informal or offshore economy, which shrinks Lebanon's productive base. There's also, of course, erosion of trust, meaning there's selective enforcement, and that destroys any confidence in governance and any sense of fairness, meaning this social pact that we're supposed to have. Anyway, last week we witnessed one specific case of the methodology that is used by the state and the lack of recognition of a due process and how important it is to treat well the formal private sector is the case of the water company last week. So had they gone by the norms of due process, by the norms of collecting samples, by doing it undercover because it is a formal company that needs to be protected, we wouldn't have had this entire crisis that took place. Meanwhile, one should protect the health of the citizens and all of that if we are looking at things objectively. Meanwhile, you have all the informal water companies and they go unnoticed. So what does that do to the formal private sector? Again, increase of cost and getting out of the market gradually. How can we build a fiscal social compact? We suggest a new type of partnership. So one form of partnership is clarity. I believe if the government is able to at least clearly state and show us in a dashboard, this is the extent of formality that exists, and where do we want to go, and what are the measures we're doing in order to incentivize this formality. We're doing, I was so happy to see so many ideas, and they're all great, whether they have to do with regional development or gradual taxation in order to encourage informal to formal, or looking at many countries that have actually used incentives to formalize rather than just penalties for the minor digression of the formal companies. Do we still have time?
You still have 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. So one of the suggestions is also when coming to come up with this new fiscal social compact is to ensure that the private sector is included in a task force in order to say what is realistic, what is actually encouraging, and what is a fair deal. Therefore, we're going to get more while we are complying more. What are possible suggestions? I heard a lot about digitizing compliance through e-invoicing, digital labor contracts, and all of that, and you guys know a lot more about this, and this was covered originally. Cracking down on the cash economy, which Federico Lima called the elephant in the room. It's not even an elephant in the room, it's an existing reality, and the sooner we get out of the cash economy, the sooner we're able to actually implement any of the reforms that we need to put in place. Incentivizing formality, linking tax credits, financing access to declaring employment and NSSF registration could be one of those. Targeted employment incentives for youth, for underprivileged, for women, for persons with disabilities, and small and medium enterprises. Giving preferential access to public tenders for those that are compliant. Preferential treatment or tax credit to those that are complying with environment, social, and governance norms. That could be one of those. The task force that I recommended to be a joint task force on job creation and formality, and linking job creation with formality, maybe chaired by the Minister of Labor and other ministers, to review reforms and remove the disincentives to formalization. And then consider redesigning this economic model. So we have to shift from an extractive policy to an inclusive policy. We can't keep extracting from the formal private sector, but let's become more inclusive to those that are informal. Possibility of reducing corporate tax, maybe not many of you are going to like it, while gradually increasing VAT, tied to service delivery and growth in certain regions in the country. Encourage privatization, we spoke about this morning, and professional management of state-owned enterprises. And definitely try to learn from case studies in other countries. What have other countries done who have successfully moved from a large chunk of informal economy to the formal economy?